Hi everyone, welcome to a new video for the Craft Kitsune YouTube channel. This video is UV Resin Basics, or getting started with UV Resin. This video is meant for beginners to UV resin, but if you are more experienced using this particular medium, hopefully you can still learn something new or get inspired by some of the projects. So I put together a UV resin starter kit, and this is a standalone kit aside from the subscription box, so I recommend it if you are brand new to UV resin to buy this box before you get your first subscription box if you're interested in becoming a subscriber, or if you just want to play with UV resin. This is a great starter kit. I changed up some of the items in this kit from the very first starter kit I did about a year ago now, and so this is the 2.0 version. So most of the supplies are housed in this container box here, so let me quickly go over everything that's inside. So I made sure to include everything that you need to get started with UV resin, and then enough supplies, embellishments, molds, and bezels to make a variety of different projects. I've personally made lots of projects from all of these supplies. I've tested all of the supplies, and they are supplies that I would want if I was brand new to UV resin. This kit is available to purchase on the shop website, which you can find in the description box below, and the shop also includes any past month kits that are still in stock. So after we see everything included in this starter kit, I'm going to go over the basics to UV resin and some tips and tricks, and then we'll get into the projects. So UV resin is a craft medium. It comes in bottles like this, seen here, and it comes as a clear liquid, but then it will cure or harden once you introduce it to UV rays. So this can either be a UV lamp or flashlight or the sun as well. So because it comes as a liquid, it is a very versatile medium. So you can add color, you can add glitter, you can use molds or bezels or lots of different ways to manipulate this medium. It also is great for varnishing or polishing clay creations if you use a brush with it. And you can also use it to create little details on pieces, such as like water droplets or things like that. If you're looking to make an environment where you want it to look like water, that would also be a handy use for UV resin. So here I have a silicone flexible mold, and this mold is clear. If you are using molds with UV resin, you must make sure that the molds are clear because the UV rays needed to cure the resin need to be able to pass through. So if you use an opaque mold, it won't be able to cure properly. So UV resin is not meant for children, and it is something you need to handle with care. You should not use UV resin outside because it will cure once you expose it to UV rays. So when you're working with UV resin, make sure to work in a well-ventilated area. I also recommend wearing a respirator, and then definitely wear some gloves. I forgot. I'm being a really bad example. I'm sorry. Alright, so I remembered my gloves, and now I'm just filling the silicone mold, making sure that the UV resin goes all the way to the sides of the mold, and because it's a pendant mold, making sure that it has gone around the hole meant for the pendant. So now I'm going to try to get rid of some of the bubbles, or ideally all of the bubbles, in the UV resin. So I really recommend this style of torch lighter to pop bubbles in UV resin because it's very easy to use over the molds. And then just use the flame for a couple seconds and it should pop most of the bubbles that have formed inside of the resin. I also like to use a needle tool to move around the resin where the bubbles are the most prominent or like gathered, especially if there's a bigger bubble I'm trying to get rid of, to move around the resin around the bubble, and this will either burst it or bring it to the surface, which will make using the lighter more efficient at popping it. So in order to now cure or harden the piece, I'm placing it under this UV lamp. So this lamp emits UV rays. So here are the UV resin curing times depending on if you're using a lamp or the sun. For UV resin crafters, you're most likely going to be using a UV lamp or a UV torch. So UV resin becomes pretty hot to the touch because of the curing process. So after waiting a bit, from when I use the UV lamp on this piece, it's ready to demold or take out from the mold. So that's what I'm doing here. Silicone molds make demolding really easy, and you can find lots of really entertaining and fun to watch unmolding videos on Instagram. So here is UV resin just by itself. It's clear, and I didn't add any embellishments or any colorant, so this is what it looks like. So now let's get into doing some more projects and more techniques with UV resin. Alright, so let's start with the open back Kitsune bezels. An open back bezel was actually my first project when I started with UV resin. And I really love the designs of these open back bezels. Of course, they are Kitsune, which is my brand, right on brand. So I'm going to be filling them in with UV resin and embellishments, and in order to do so, you will need to seal one of the sides because they are open bezels. So this tape is really great for that purpose. So I'm going to be making all 10 at once, but of course you don't have to do this. Alright, so I have them all taped down, so here are all of the designs. And then I cut the tape so that I can work on each bezel individually. So I'll be filling in the bezels with both colors of UV resin as well as the clear, so kind of 3 colors total. And then I'm also going to be using the words section on the design film. So then I'm going to cut out each of the words just to have them ready to go for when I'm going to place them inside the bezels. And so there's a variety of words. This one that I'm cutting out here says kawaii in Japanese hiragana. Once I have those all cut out, I'm ready to get started filling in the bezels. So the thin nozzles on the UV resin bottles allow you to place the UV resin directly into the bezels. And then I use the Gem Tops tool set to spread the resin around or to move it around. So next I apply the pink UV resin where I want it. And then I apply the clear UV resin where I want it. Next I use the tools to spread it out and make sure that all the resin that I applied hits the edges of the bezel. Next I go in with my lighter to pop all the bubbles. And then I go in with my spoon tool to add some of the assorted glitter shapes inside. And then I use my needle tool as well as the spreader tool to position the glitter the way that I want inside the bezel. And here I am going in to place one of the words, and so this one says create. And then I use my tools to help me push it down a bit so that it's completely covered in the UV resin. And now it's ready to cure, so I place it under my UV lamp and turn the UV lamp on. So then I filled in the rest of the 9 bezels in a similar fashion. And then once I peel them off the tape, they are done. You can also optionally put a layer of clear UV resin to the backs, the part that peeled off from the tape, to make it more shiny on that side as well. So I love my new set of Kitsune bezels. I'll be combining them with things I make in the next tutorials as well. Alright, so for my second project, I'm going to be making some pendants. So I'm taking 3 of the silicone pendant molds and I'm going to be layering different colors. So I use the clear resin for the top parts for each of the pendants. And then I applied a line of the pink UV resin and then the blue UV resin. I did that for all 3 of the molds and then popped the bubbles. And then I'm using a needle tool to swirl the colors together so that it doesn't look as jarring, so that the colors look more like they're blended together. I'm also going to be adding a lot of glitter to each one. and then curing them under the UV lamp for 2 to 3 minutes. And then after I wait for them to cool from the curing process, I take them out of the molds. And then to add a little bit something extra, I'm going to be adding some metal embellishments on top of each of the pendants. So I start by applying a very thin layer of UV resin and then using my tools to spread it out across the top of each of the pendants. I'm not too worried about resin getting inside of the holes because it is a very thin layer of resin, and I can always use my needle tool later to reopen the hole. So I just take some of the metal embellishments from the set that's included in the starter kit and I place them on top of each of the pendants. So now I'm going to show off the UV flashlight, and so I'm going to just click it on and then it has a UV ray that will cure these pieces. After these are cured, I'm going to set them aside. I'll be using them with the Kitsune bezels to make some keychains, but I'll do that later. By later, I mean after the third project. Alright, so I'm going to making a Sakura flower. So I have my Sakura mold here, and this time I'm going to be using the UV resin first by pouring it into the silicone mixing bowl instead of directly inside the mold. That way I can dump in embellishments, in this case my glitter, ahead of time, and if you have any colorants such as alcohol inks or other colorants that work in UV resin, you can add those here now as well. I decided to throw in some metal embellishments just for some more added fun. And then I'm going to pour my concoction inside of my mold. And then I also decided to add some color, so I'm going in with the pink UV resin and applying it to the edges of the mold. Alright, so then I cure it for 2 to 3 minutes under the UV lamp. And then it's ready to be birthed. And by that I mean unmolded. Just seeing if you're paying attention. Here I'm using some jewelry pliers to combine the bezels with the pendants, and then for one, the Sakura for one of the keychains, that is. And I have lots of fun pieces still to turn into future keychains or future projects, future jewelry, we'll see. So here are some finished product shots. I'm really happy with how everything turned out, and I think it all looks really cute and pretty. So that was my getting started with UV resin tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or comments or feedback, leave it in the comment section. I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. And then if you want to find out more about Craft Kitsune, you can go to the main website. Link is in the description. Bye guys, see you in the next video.